I'm Adam Moz, and this is Moz Models. Welcome back to the next video in the ETHOS for Spektrum users series, continuing on with the 1.5 meter Maule setup. Today we're out at the field. We've got a battery, we've got a fully assembled Maule, we've got the X18. We're going to do the stabilizer final setup, and then, if everything goes well, we're going to do a maiden. I may not be able to get the maiden on video. I don't have a helper, but we'll see about what we can do about that. So, without further ado, let's get to the setup. Now, just one safety note. You'll note I do not have the prop on. That's so I don't have to worry about any danger when I power this thing on. I strongly recommend, if you're doing setup for a new aircraft in particular, take the prop off, save your fingers. Save the aircraft from flying away. I've seen cases where somebody's doing setup at a bench at the field and they've got a prop on and they accidentally hit that throttle and the airplane just jumps. I saw some students last year actually destroy the laptop they were working with while dealing with a fixed wing aircraft with a flight controller built into it, so limited autonomy. They had hit the prop. They had that thing set up on the bench. The laptop was in front of it. Hit the throttle by accident, jumped forward, smacked the prop onto the laptop screen, destroyed the screen, broke the prop, flew everywhere. A couple of guys got splinters. Don't be those guys. Be safe. No props when you're doing setup for a new aircraft. Now, I'm just going to turn this around, and we're going to take this and we're just going to power it on so that we can actually get started. Now, first thing we need to do is not check the control direction. We need to actually get this thing into self-stabilization mode and make sure that it's set up properly. And this thing wants to flip over. So I'm going to go over to the device configuration menu under models, the SXR menu, and I'm going to set my mounting type. It's set to level right now, and I'm going to set it to level reversed. Come back. And it looks like it wants to. Yeah, it's detecting level, but it's got reversing issues. So I'm going to set my ailerons to inverted. And you can see now that when I rotate it, it's working. I'm going to set my elevator. And it wants to set level right about there. So we're good. Now I'm just going to see, are we getting anything? Now that means, you'll notice that now that I've set the stabilization direction, I have a problem with my ailerons being reversed. So we're going to go back and we're going to go to outputs, and I'm going to set my ailerons to inverted so they're the right size. And my elevator is correct right now. And actually, no, sorry, my elevator is reversed as well. Let's be careful about that. Pull back to up, push down to down. And we're pretty darn good there. Notice we're not quite level, so when I level out the aircraft, which is right about there, everything's nice and level. That's good. The last thing is my rudder is reversed in outputs as well. Now, one thing I'll warn you about, there is no really easy way to set your rudder for the stabilization. It's really, you got to flip it into stabilization turn up the gain and see if it wiggles. Because in self level, if I turn up, and I'm just going to, and I set the gain in this particular case on my T5, so I'm just going to turn it all the way up. And we do have a reversing issue. This is a little trick. If you turn the gain up, you can see the response on the surface, which you won't be able to see at any sort of gain that you're going to want to use. So, and what you want to do is when you pull that rapidly towards you, you want the rudder to come towards you, because that's pushing pushing it away. And now you'll see I've got my rudder reversed as well, and we'll go to outputs and we'll fix that too. And the next thing you do, turn that gain back down, because you've got way too much. I like to start with gain somewhere between 30 and 50%. In this aircraft, I'm just going to drop it down to 30%. So now we've got a setup that is pretty much ready to maiden. I'm just going to do a quick CG check, and yes, I do know that I don't have the prop on, but if this is in the ballpark for CG, I know that when I put the prop on, I'll be just a touch nose heavier than I am now. So I'm looking for something that's just a touch tail heavy at this point. And yeah, that 3300 is super tight. Not going anywhere. I'm just going to find my CG marks, and you can see I am actually probably a touch nose heavy on this with the big 3200 battery. It'll be great when I put a 2200 in, which is what I plan on flying it on most of the time. So I'm going to throw the prop on, and we're pretty much ready to maiden. But as you can see, it's pretty darn quick to go and do the final setup for the self level and get all your motions correct. You do always have to remember, set up your stabilization direction before you set up your channel, your stick direction, because the stabilization direction applies to the surface first. So your SR series receiver knows its stabilization direction. It's getting the stick direction from you. It is doing that inversion. When you set it to inverted, it's doing that inversion to your sticks as well. So setting up an SR, put it into self-level mode, make sure you've got it set up properly, and then make sure that all of your self-level is balancing correctly and giving the correct inputs, as we're doing here. So if this wing comes down, aileron comes down, 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 and up. Let's see those. And then you're ready to set your sticks and set the outputs on the transmitter so that your sticks give, again, the same correct motion. So be very careful about that. It's a really great way to crash an airplane if you do it in the opposite direction. Because you go, you set your sticks, everything's golden. You flip SXR disable, everything's golden, it's flyable. You go set up stabilization, you set your stabilization direction, take off, and your ailerons are reversed and you crash the airplane. So be careful about that workflow. It is particular. Like a lot of things with stabilization, you have to do everything right the first time to get the aircraft into a flyable situation. This is true for every stabilization system. Some of them will learn automatically from the radio what is correct. That is a really nice feature. That, by the way, is the Spektrum forward programming experience. But the flip side is you got to make sure that you test everything out on the ground before you fly it with stabilization on, regardless of the system. Even forward programming, there's a bug right now actually in forward programming where they show the wrong receiver orientation. It's really easy to get wrong. You get the whole thing set up and suddenly you've realized that you've set it up so it thinks that is level. And that's not particularly flyable. So there is one last thing I've got to do on this, and that is I'm going to set my, let me just get in here so you can see me. And actually, so you can see me, you don't need to see my hat, you want to see my face. So the last thing I got to do is I got to set my failsafe. For this, you go to model, go to RF system, go all the way down to failsafe, it'll say not set, and I set it to custom. And I'll set custom on my throttle. And I want, okay. And I just click there's a little shield icon, and click that to set it, or you can go down. And the other thing I'm going to go do is I'm going to put my stab mode also to custom, and I want it at -100. So we set the shield mode, and finally I'm going to set my rudders to custom, highlight it, and just set about 50% rudder. Now what this is doing is very simple. If I get a failsafe, lose connection to the radio, it's going to cut the throttle, it's going to put the aircraft in self-level mode, and it's going to put about 50% rudder throw in either direction, does not matter which. So the aircraft will sit there with the throttle off, wings level, and it'll just circle down. That's the safest for the folks around you. It'll prevent a flyaway, and also it means that you've got a good chance of getting the aircraft back in a repairable shape, unless it goes into a tree or something like that as it's circling down. But if it hits any sort of open ground, it's going to plop right in, minimum damage to everything, and that's your best case. Safety of the people surrounding you, safety of the stuff surrounding you, it's not your stuff, be careful of it, and then safety of the aircraft comes dead last, but it still should be considered. So that's it for today. We've gone through, we've set all of our stabilization directions. We have set our failsafe, we've set our CG. I need to throw the prop on there and it'll be ready to fly.